and send it to him. So, hi Ken. Okay, so we're talking about our church culture. It's the next chapter, and I want to look at an awesome verse. Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, purified, made holy, by responding to the truth with obedience, so that you have sincere love for each other, I want you to now what? If you know this verse off by heart, don't sing it out, because we're going to think about it a little bit. So, purity through obedience to the truth. So really, obedience to the truth comes first, then we're made holy. That's the deal. Then we love each other. What do you think comes next? Truth, obedience, holiness, love. Wonder what's next. Is it mission? Mission's a good thing, isn't it? Or social action, doing good things? Or is it discipleship? Growing the body? It's pretty important. Is it teaching? Teaching's pretty important. Is it getting into the Word? Is it being filled with the Spirit? Is it worship? Is it patient hope? Well, you've been very patient. I'm going to show you. There you go. You have been very patient. I reckon you could probably work this out. So, anyone recognise these letters? Kappa, Alpha, Rho, heart. So heart. Okay, so far so good. What about this one? Alpha, Gamma, Alpha, Pi, Agape. What's agape? Anyone have a clue? Love one another deeply from the heart. So obedience to truth leads to holiness. Then you love one another. And what comes next? You love each other more. You love each other deeper. This from the heart thing. Why? Because you've been born again. Not of perishable seed, but of imperishable seed. The stuff of God. Eugene says it like this: now that you've cleaned up your lives by following the truth, love one another as if your lives depended on it. Your new life is not like your old life. Your old birth came from mortal sperm. Eugene. Your new birth comes from God's living word. So it's saying it's a whole different quality of life. Just think about it. You've entered into a life that God thought up and energised. Or the living says, now that you've done all that, you've cleansed from selfishness and hatred, so you trust. See to it that you really do love each other warmly with all your hearts. Because you've got a new life. It was not passed on by your parents. The life they gave you will fade away. This one lasts forever because it's of Christ. So, what comes after love? More love. Deeper loving. New King James says it nicely. You purified your souls by obeying the truth into unfeigned love. Now see that you love each other with a pure heart fervently. Why? Why does love come after love? It's the nature of God, and now it's our nature. Remember, we've been given this new life. You've been born again into this new life. So you've got this stuff, this nature of God in you, and God is love. So this is the life you have now. Why do we love? Because it's who we are. That's what we are now. Well, we want to be a relational church, one that loves each other deeply. Why? Because it's the only sort of life that fits with who we are. Anyone think of any other verses about loving one another? Corinthians? The whole chapter 13 is about love, isn't it? Paints a picture of love, the portrait of love. These great things, what are the great things? Faith, hope and love. Which is the greatest? Love. So after all that description of love, it's patient, it's kind, doesn't keep track of wrong. So Corinthians certainly talks about love. Any others? We love because He first loved us. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another.
By this shall all men know.
John, by this everyone will know. Any other?
Love covers a multitude.
Yes, Ephesians, love covers over a multitude of sins. Keep on loving, bear with one another.
There's a verse that says something about loving genuinely.
Yes, yes. Might be Romans 12, talks about loving each other genuinely. Yeah? We making this up with these random verses, or is this a theme? Love endures forever. His love endures forever. Yeah? I have 4 pages of verses here, if you'd like me to read them. Keep on loving each other. 1 Peter, since love covers a multitude of sins. Be devoted to one another. Owe no one anything except the debt of love. For the one who loves has fulfilled the law. By this we know love, that He laid down His life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. Therefore, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with humility, gentleness and patience, bear with one another in love. Galatians, you've been called to freedom. What do you do with that freedom? You spend it on yourself. You use your freedom to love one another. John has some pretty powerful things to say. Anyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves He who has been born of Him. For this is the message you've heard from the beginning, that you should love one another. Colossians talks about getting up and putting on your clothes. So as God's dearly loved people, what do we put on? We put on love, because it's the right uniform. It's the right thing to put on. Lots and lots about love, and some strong things that if we don't love, then we don't really know Him. So, okay. Love seems to be a theme. Well, what does it look like? So a psychologist, a Jewish man called John Gottman, who spent over 40 years studying human interaction. And he found that he could predict how initially couples were going to go, whether they were going to break up or thrive long term. And it came down to some fairly innocent appearing interactions. He noticed that, he called it the bid-response process. He noticed that one person would make a bid, which is a movement towards connection. It could be verbal or non-verbal. And the other person would make a response. And basically positive or negative responses. People who received positive responses bid again, and the other person bid back, and you had this beautiful thing happening where both were engaging and moving closer together and connecting. When someone bid and someone did a negative response, people soon stopped bidding. And he found that it was true in workplaces. So you can do Gottman Institute training for your workplace. And it seems to be true of humans. So, this guy here is going to make a bid. And this person is going to make a response. So, one of the responses, or group of responses, he called turning towards. So it was essentially a positive response. The next group of responses he called turning away. And the last group he called turning against. What were they again? Turning towards, turning away, turning against. Okay, well, we don't follow pop psychology. Is it biblical that we should want to connect, move towards each other? That we should respond positively to each other? Is there any verses you can think of? Brilliant, yes, yeah. Yeah, any New Testament verses about responding to each other?
Love your enemies.
Love your enemies, okay. So that's not so much a positive bid, that's an antagonistic bid, but our response is supposed to be the same, to turn towards. Yeah, it's a good golden rule. What about Ephesians 4:29? You all know that one? What's that talking about? Building people up according to their need. So the bid is made and then you respond with what love looks like. James 1's talking about if you don't have a grip on how you respond, then you don't really have got it. You haven't got the idea. And this one talks about speaking the truth in love, which is sort of content and motive. Okay, so what does it look like? Well, here's some imagined conversations. These could be things I heard in this building last week, or I could have imagined them. So let's call someone B. They say good morning to R. R says, good morning, B. How was your week? That's not so much a bid as an invitation to bid, isn't it? So it's curiosity, it's interest. B says, okay, but I'm having some issues at work. There's some stuff going on that's not right and I'm having to challenge it. What's that? That is a bid, isn't it? So it's some sharing of themselves. They're actually going through a struggle, aren't they? And they're sharing about it. How do you think the person's going to respond? Yeah, I had to do that all the time when I worked. I wasn't very popular, but you've got to do it. What is that? It's a turning away, isn't it? What happens when we bid and people turn away? We tend to stop bidding, but this person didn't. I find it really hard. I don't really like conflict. So they're bidding again. They're inviting more information, more connection. I love it. Brings out my feisty side. And they laugh. And the other person talks about the Broncos. So you can see the dynamic, isn't it? So in that case, a bid, a sharing, and then a sort of a turning away. Probably unintentional, just a little bit self-absorbed maybe. Missed a chance, didn't they? And the other person shut down. Imagine conversation number 2. Hi X, great to see you. Are you home on holidays? Yes, I've got 2 weeks. Nothing really so far, is there? How's it going down there? What's that? Well, it's sort of an invitation to bid, isn't it? What do they say? Fine, I guess. So sort of not really bidding, are they? Look what A does. What is A doing? She's smiling, she's waiting, she looks like she really is interested in their answer. You know, often we say, how are you going? And we don't really mean it. We mean, blah. But sometimes we really mean it. And this person, Megan, oops, that slipped out, really means it. So they're genuinely interested. Anyway, see you around. You bet, and gives them a warm hug. So there's a person who is inviting bidding beautifully, aren't they? But it's just not coming, but that's okay. The message she's sending is, I'm interested, I'm here, when you want to share, I'm there. And it's okay that you don't want to share today. So that's sort of a really positive response, isn't it, in the face of an absence of bidding. Okay, imagine conversation number 3. I've numbered them 1 and 2 to protect their identity. 2. Could be an unnamed pharmacist. I've been meaning to thank you for your last sermon. It really got me thinking. 2. Could be an unnamed doctor. That's okay, it was a rush job. I was crazy busy. So look at what 1 has done. Have they bid? They have, haven't they? Every preacher hopes that their message touches someone, and this person wants to talk about that. And what does the preacher do? It's turning away, isn't it? They missed the mark. But number 1 persists. It really spoke to me. It was just what I needed. So again, they're rebidding, aren't they? They'd like to talk about this. Something significant happened. And what did I do? My next sermon is on church culture. Not really sure what I'm going to talk about. Still too busy. What's that? That's a turning away, isn't it? Just self-absorbed and missed the mark. See what I did there? Well, anyway, thanks again. Oh, no worries. It's only on reflection sometimes that you realise what happened there and what you missed out on. Okay, imagine conversation number 4 involving an unnamed pastor. Let's call him A. Thanks for your help on Saturday. How did you find the breakfast? That's sort of a bit, isn't it? They're curious, they're affirming, they're grateful. Food was great, but we didn't really mix as much as I hoped. And the guy didn't share about his faith. And it went over time. Now remember, imagine you're A and you've put a mountain of work into this thing. How does that response feel? It's almost like turning against, isn't it? Because of your... I mean, if you'd done nothing, you'd think, oh, okay. But if you'd invested in it, it really does feel like it's turned against. Yeah, well, I've got some good ideas about the next one. He's irrepressible, this guy. You just can't keep him down. He is positive and keen and excited about the next one. Well, don't use those stupid video clips again. It's turning against, isn't it? I was just trying to keep it a bit fun. Anyway, thanks for your feedback. Anytime.
No.
So it's possible to keep coming in the face of turning against, but it's very hard to sustain, isn't it? So any mortal is going to sort of shut down in the face of that. So think about it next time someone has invested in something and asks you about it. Just be careful with your conversation. Last one. So a young child walks into the kitchen before church. Can I have a glass of water? That's a bid. So a bid could be, will you marry me? Something big. Or it can be, can you get me a glass of water while you're up, dear? It could be a tiny little thing. This is a bid. Respondent number 1. What are they doing? They're parenting. Yeah. This is not their child. Have they been asked to parent their child? Not really. But it's instinctive for a lot of us, isn't it? We parent. Respondent number 2. Wait till after kids' church. We're getting communion ready. So kids don't really get church. What they sort of get is that this is where God lives. So this kid is not asking, can I have a glass of water? He's actually asking, what is God like?
God wants her to have a glass of water, probably.
And what is the answer to that question? What is God like? He's grumpy, he's distracted, he's busy. He apologises and leaves. Okay. The kid is actually right. God does live here. Because why? He lives in us. Do you realise the whole issue of the existence of God and what He's like is supposed to be settled by looking at us, how we treat each other. We quoted it before. The whole world is supposed to know that I live, that I'm good, and that I'm alive in you by how you treat each other. Wow, that's supposed to be the definitive argument. Hang on a minute. Does a group of ordinary people with a common interest doing what they like prove that God is real and good and alive? Does the Sims Cricket Club prove that? Or DATS? Or the Dubbo Orchid Society? One of my patients has just written a book on the history of the Dubbo Orchid Society. It's like 900 pages. Going to be a big seller, I suspect. Do those little clusters of people doing a common interest, does that prove God's real? No, it doesn't. So what's going on? Let's think about that description again. What did I say? A group of ordinary people. Hang on a minute. Are we ordinary people? We have been born again. We are a hybrid, a divine hybrid. So we have an eternal life in us. We've been born again. And this life is supposed to give us a new power, a new freedom. It's supposed to change us. We're a new creation with a common interest. that why we're here? Because we like orchids? No, we're a family, aren't we? Families don't always get on, but family bonds are strong. We are a family. Doing what we like? Well, breakfast was nice at the men's breakfast, but if you thought it was about food, you missed the mark, didn't you? Or the ladies' meeting at the farmers' markets, it wasn't about the coffee. You missed the life when you think that's what it's about. Lewis talks about this new life, and he makes a point that it's not about making us nicer. It's not about making people nicer. Love is not growing manners. He says God became a man in order to turn creatures into his sons, not to produce a better type of man of the old sort, but to produce a new kind of man altogether. And he used the idea of increasing niceness is like teaching a horse to jump higher and higher. But the new life is like giving a horse wings. So instead of just flogging a horse, training it to jump higher and higher, the new man has a new power, a new dynamic, a new heart. So what does it look like? Well, the other day our neighbour moved into our old house next door, and there was an army of people there. Building new steps, putting together the trampoline, working in the garden, cooking, families, children, older people, looking like they were having fun, working hard, but how could they possibly enjoy that? What are they getting out of it? If you're as an observer looking at that thinking, what are they there? Okay, someone's baking scones, but really? They worked hard all day. So that's not our church, but that's a body. And that's the gospel, isn't it? That's life at work that doesn't make sense if there's no God. Or it could look a bit like this. Crazy, chaotic, creative, energetic, fun-loving, but also serious, intimacy. Or it could just look like two people talking and one of them choosing to bid, to open up, and the other one choosing to listen and to care. That's what it might look like. Tennessee Williams tells a story about a Russian Jew called Jacob Brodsky. He was quite shy. His father owned a bookstore. His father wanted him to go off to college, but Jacob wanted to marry his beautiful childhood sweetheart, Lila. She was a French girl, vivacious, outgoing, charismatic, ambitious, and he was quite retiring and shy. A few months after the young Jacob went off to college, his father grew sick and died. So Jacob came home, buried his father and married his love. The couple moved into the apartment above the bookstore. Brodsky took over the management. The life suited him perfectly, a life of books, but it cramped Lila. She wanted adventure. And an agent came along and told her she had a wonderful voice and should join their troupe, which was touring Europe. She agreed. Brodsky was devastated. At their parting, he reached into his pocket and handed her the key to the front door of the bookstore. He said, "You'd better keep this. You'll want it someday. Your love is no less than mine. You will come back, and I'll be waiting." To escape the pain that he felt, Brodsky withdrew deep into his bookstore and took to reading, as someone might take to drinking. He spoke little, did little, all the time could be found at his desk at the back of the store, immersed in his books, waiting. 15 years later, at Christmas time, she returned. But when he rose from his desk, he didn't recognise her. He said, "Would you like a book?" She was startled, and then she realised he hadn't recognised her. She said, "I do want a book, but I've forgotten the name of it." So she told him the story. Childhood sweethearts. A newly married couple who lived in an apartment above a bookstore. A young ambitious wife who left to seek a career, but who could never relinquish the key that her husband gave her. His face showed no recognition. She realised he'd forgotten. She said, "You must remember." After a long pause, he said, "Actually, it does ring a bell. I think it's something by Tolstoy. I think I've got it over here." She dropped the key and left the shop. When you read a verse about loving each other, does it feel like a personal trainer telling you to try harder? Or a teacher saying you've got to lift your grades? It's not a harsh command. The call to love each other is Lila at our door, inviting us to live a life away from our safe books, a life of adventure that will stretch us and change us. And we'll complain about the lumpiness in our shoulders as we try to jump higher, and then we'll realise that we can fly. Father, please make us people that love each other deeply, from the heart. Amen.